Good afternoon, Utah, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Genevieve Keys. I'm the Public Information Officer with the Utah Division of Emergency Management. With me today is Tracy Harrison. She is our flood insurance guru. She's a representative for NFIP, that's the National Flood Insurance Program. Thank you for joining us today, Tracy.
Thanks, Genevieve, for inviting me.
Of course. So, we're here to talk about flooding and the recent storms that happened. Those storms can be pretty intense.
Yeah, that was quite an intense event that we did have. So, yeah, it's time for us to talk about flooding and the benefits of flood insurance.
Right. So a lot of people in Utah don't think about flooding because they think, I live in a desert. Why would I need flood insurance?
Yeah, that's a common thing that I do here. And in Utah, yeah, we do live in a desert state, but we do see a lot of flooding. We see a lot of individual isolated flooding events, especially this time of year when we get those monsoonal rains that are really intense. And we see a lot of flooding events in Utah when we have our snow melt. So usually in spring, we again talk about flood insurance and the importance of being protected.
So someone who's watching right now, what do they need to know about flood insurance?
So I think some of the key takeaways for flood insurance is anywhere it rains, it can flood. And so with the National Flood Insurance Program, if their community is participating in that program, they can get flood insurance regardless of if they're in a flood mapped area or not. If their community doesn't participate in the National Flood Insurance Program, they can get it through the private market.
Okay. So we talked about homeowners then. Can renters get flood insurance too?
Yeah, good question. So homeowners can get that, renters can get it on their contents, and I really recommend that if you're renting and you're in that lower level unit, that's primarily where the floodwaters are probably going to come in, and so that would be important to take a look at that. Business owners can get flood insurance also, and typically the price for flood insurance to the National Flood Insurance Program, usually about $679 on average for the year. It's a little bit less for renters.
Is there somewhere someone like me can go and look up and find out an estimate for what flood insurance might cost?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the floodsmart.utah.gov can lead you to some insurance carriers that can provide you with flood insurance quotes. You can check with your local agent, but I'd say if your agent isn't familiar with the flood insurance programs or they might not be able to sell the flood insurance, then I would say go back to the floodsmart.gov.
Is there a best time of year to buy flood insurance, like in spring after the snow melt or in monsoon season?
The best time to buy flood insurance is now. There is a 30-day waiting period for the National Flood Insurance Program. So waiting until we get emergency alerts or knowing that a storm is going to be coming next week, that's a little too late. So we want to get flood insurance as soon as possible because you do have that 30-day waiting period.
All right, so we don't want to wait until the storm's here. This is not like running to the store last minute to get some emergency supplies.
No, this is being prepared beforehand. Just like you put together your emergency preparedness kit, this should be part of your kit. You should be having some flood insurance.
Excellent. So, are there any other common misconceptions or myths surrounding flood insurance?
Yeah, I've heard quite a few of those. One of those is I live on a hill, so I'm not going to have that risk. And we've seen recently in Salt Lake County that that's not quite the case. We do have flooding even if you do live on a hill slope. Another one is that my basement wouldn't be covered. And NFIP flood insurance program does limit personal property in a basement, but they do cover for basements for foundational work, dry walls, and things like that. So those are kind of some of the most common misconceptions I hear.
So for homeowners, it covers the home, but not the contents of the home.
It does cover the contents above the basement. So
Oh,
it wasn't
okay.
cover contents below in the basement, but it does a second story type of a thing.
Okay, I see. So can you tell me what someone should do if there is like an active flood warning or, high risk of flooding in their area? What's something that we can do to protect ourselves?
So the key thing I think is to make sure that you're signed up for weather alerts. You can sign up through your local emergency management. County usually has local alerts for that, or the National Weather Service, and making sure you're paying attention to those alerts. So if those alerts are coming out, don't be in the basement. Don't have your kids spend the night in the basement. Maybe move those to higher ground. If you're out, recreating, move to higher ground. And we don't want you to be walking in floodwaters, lots of contaminants in there, and you don't want to be driving. So we do have that turn around, don't drown.
All right. So if I'm making a cross-country trip and I get a flash flood warning, I need to pull over and find somewhere to stay for the night?
Yes, that would be great. Yeah, a little stay, I mean, or making sure that you're getting to higher ground, definitely.
So what are the top 3 things that you want folks here today to take away from our conversation?
Just those common myths that I hear that somebody is called to see if they can get flood insurance and was told they could not because they didn't live in a flood area.
Mhm.
That is a misconception. You can get flood insurance. You don't have to live in those mat flood areas. I think the other thing to be aware of, again, is that 30-day waiting period. So you're going to want to get out and get your flood insurance put into place before those flooding events are going to occur. And then just try and making sure that you are prepared. Just put it in your, backpack so you got preparedness. This is just a way of preparing, protecting your house.
So where else can I find more information on like what to put in my emergency backpack or about flood insurance or flood hazards in Utah?
Yeah, so we've got a great website. It's called on our Utah side, it's floodhazards.utah.gov. It has information about flood risk. It has information about what to do before and after a flooding event, and also some flood insurance. And I would say to be prepared, you would want to go to utahbeready.gov. That one will help you put together your packs, emergency, evacuation plans, and then look at going to floodsmart.gov. That will help you with the flood insurance side of things if your local agent isn't able to help you with that.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining
Yeah,
us today,
my
Tracy. I
pleasure.
appreciate it. And thank you all for joining today.